Okay, hello, hello, hello. Welcome again. Today, you're with Denden Kushi. We're streaming, taking a look at Seraphim and Green Blood. The idea is that Seraphim are still quite. There's a lot of information we don't know about them yet. They're still quite vague, and ultimately, we don't know where they're going in the story because there's loads of them. They're very, very powerful. It's kind of like the android situation in Dragon Ball's, in Dragon Ball Z. Like, we've just got to like see how it plays out. But there are some clues and bits and bobs that we can look at that tell us more about the Seraphim, particularly how they are made, what they actually are, like what they consist of, what the whole situation is going on there. So we're going to dive into that. I'll also touch on like a connection, like the connections between the Seraphim and their original hosts, whether or not some have stronger connections than others. We know that the Seraphim are a former clone, but we don't know. We don't really know what the situation is with if they were each taken from the DNA and blood of each of the hosts, or if they're direct copies, or obviously with Kuma and Esper it's very different because we know that Vegapunk was using his body print basically for the Pacifista. They're physical clones of the body, not of the mind of Kuma, whereas Seraphim are slightly different because they have the mind as well. So give me a sec to make sure the stream's all running smooth. Let me know if there's any issues in the comments, blah 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 blah. You know the drill at this point. Sorry, that's just my phone going crazy. Right, let me double check. Right, we I think we're good, so I'm just going to crack on, and I'm guessing most people are going to watch this back anyway, like, in which case feel free still to drop a comment or like jump in the Discord, let me know what you think, or challenge what, like, the idea of the streams is it's just more free and it can go on for a bit longer and it's more of a discussion rather than in the videos I'm quite direct, so yeah. Anyway, we're also going to be looking at like the little physical features of the Seraphim that I've touched on a couple of times before. People in TLA have, not much of the rest of the community seem to be that, like, pick up on it that much, but I do. The more we've spoken about it, the more important I think it is. An example of this is with S-Snake. She has the earrings of Boa. It's like, that's totally unnecessary. Oda might have just added that to make the characters more distinguishable between each other, because some of them look really alike, particularly if they didn't have the markings. So like that might have been a problem, and then Oda was like, I'll add the details or whatever. So after that, we're going to talk about the loyalty between the Seraphim. Essentially, we know that like they are loyal to the authority chip and certain like hard-coded responses to certain levels of authority. So not just the authority chip, but the Gorosei. In the last chapter, I think 1093, it was that Vegapunk or Pythagoras or someone said like, we've got, like, once the Pacifistas are on the island, or while they're on the island, there's no command higher than Vegapunk's. But I'm sure we'll see that tested. That's why Oda said it. Then I'm going to touch on the future and escaping Egghead Island. This is partly why I'm talking about the Seraphim, is because, like, leaving Egghead Island, if you've heard me discuss this stuff before, I thought was just going to be like the Navy are there and the Straw Hats will have to pop out the top using like a Cuda burst or some like Pluton like mixture of technology with the Sunny and Pluton, kind of like we've seen with the Pseudo Uranus, which is the Mother Flame, which came from Egghead. I imagine, right? It's an ancient island. There's going to be some sort of schematics or parts or some sort of clue as to how York realised how to build the Mother Flame. So there might be the same. We might be able to make the same case with Pluton, with the ship, or with Frankie. But the problem is now Kizaru's there, and Kizaru's so quick, faster than light, right? Or as fast as light. So I'm not even sure if like a Cuda burst or anything like that would be effective. Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm not sure if the coup de burst would be effective because Kizaru would catch straight up with him like immediately. So yeah, pretty wobbly stuff. Then lastly, I'll probably touch on the Seraphim, like how they're kind of an equivalent to the Vegapunk satellites. Um, Again, it's not really touched on too much by the community, but I mean the parallels obviously there. Like Vegapunk created the Seraphim, he created the satellites. Satellites are like alternate forms of life, but they seem totally like not totally autonomous, but free. Maybe this is why Oda had one of them betray the others to show how autonomous they are, and free, compared to like the Seraphim, who are literally just like zombies in a way. They do show some personality, particularly with like S Snake. We know that through her lineage factor, it was hinted through her lineage factor that she still had an affection for Luffy, which is why she obeyed Luffy's commands when he told S Snake to free people from the bubbles, or no, from the petrification. Sorry. So yeah, it's interesting. And then we saw when they were caught in the bubbles, they were like, some of them were like unhappy about it. I think it was S Snake that was like having a tantrum. Okie dokie 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 dokie. So let's go straight into the green blood, okay? Because this video is coming out soon, so the notes are pretty fresh. I'll pull them up now because I've got some like short notes on it. I'm not going to give you a whole video length, don't worry. Right, okie dokie. So something that it was Lord Vegeta, aka Ragnar, who has a server, which you can find pinned in our server, in the TLA server, the links of which are in the description and blah blah blah. I'll try, if I remember, add Lord Vegeta's link to his Discord server there. And if you ever want to VC or anything like that, pretty much any time of day, there's always about 8 people, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, sometimes more, sometimes less, like in there, talking about One Piece or D&D or just pop culture, you know, just anything that's popping at the moment, really. And they're a good group of people. So yeah, if you're looking for a space just to chill and vibe, jump in them conversations. So basically, where did I put it? Just gotta find the notes. So we're looking at green. Okay, here we go. So the significance of green blood cannot really be understated once you start looking into it. The reason why is because there's 2 reasons. So firstly, if you look back, Oda's really pushed on this, like showing us the green blood, showing us the bubbles, had multiple characters explain this is how something works, you know, this is how, like, this is the magic ingredient, let's say, that makes this all work. Now, when we look at past experiments in the One Piece world, for example, trying to make ancient giants, stuff like this, there's often an issue with lifespan. So with the giants, they were given candy, which made them grow really big, but they used children because the children are young enough to sustain the transformation. Otherwise, an adult just wouldn't live long enough because their lifespan just, for some reason, gets shortened. We actually see this throughout One Piece in like the diseases and illness, particularly Amber Lead. So I mean, it's a conversation for another time. But I wouldn't be surprised if Amber Lead was being used somehow to almost transfer lifespan or like sap lifespan from these people, particularly as it affects you generationally. Like the longer it goes on for, each generation lives till a younger and younger age, which, as I say, is the effect of a lot of the experiments in the One Piece world. Excuse me. A lot of the science and stuff, for example. So let's look first, if we're talking about all the chemicals and the green blood and stuff like that, let's look at another green chemical, right? Which is SAD. Now, SAD is on Dressrosa, and the negotiations for SAD take place on Greenbit, which is a small island just off Dressrosa. Now, it's worth noting that the island doesn't look like it is from Dressrosa. It looks totally different. Like, it's an absolute, like, super dense jungle forest that's just covered in fauna and flora. So, in between these islands is a bridge, an iron bridge, which connects the two. And for the past 200 years, no one really has been allowed over there because the fighting fish sort of reside around that bridge area, and they will attack the bridge if they see people crossing. Now, this is where it just goes straight into it. It starts getting interesting. Now, the fighting fish are a really distinct, like, depiction. Like, as a drawing, they look really strange. Like a lot of stuff does in One Piece. But where in One Piece you might have a giant elephant or a giant fish, this looks like a combination of loads. And like probably most, like the thing that stands out the most is the eyes. They have like the sort of Rinnegan that we see with Emu and blah blah blah, right? So now when you look at the fighting lion, fighting bull, the fighting bull has the horns that we see on the fighting fish, and the fighting lion has these circular eyes that we see on the fighting fish. But where does the fish part come from? Well, there are goldfish that are not native to Dressrosa, but they live there, and they basically, these goldfish are the giant ones that we saw, I think, poop out an island. It's pretty much the same one, I believe, same species. Now, so we have goldfish, the fighting bull, and the fighting lion, which all seem to make up the fighting fish. Now, what's going to have made, you know, something like this happen, right? Mutation. We can all just assume. I can go into the nitty gritty details, but we can assume there's been some sort of mutation, right? So we look for clues around the area for anything that might cause a mutation. Well, we have the SAD factory and the green. And on the tank that said SAD, when Law discovered it, there was a huge nuclear sign, right? Now, nuclear is often depicted as green in media as well, and is often associated with mutation and stuff like this. We know that sort of pollution is a classic issue, dumping, waste, stuff like that. So we can assume that the water, the surrounding water of Dressrosa somehow has SAD in there, whether or not it's been dumped, leaked, whatever. As a byproduct, there is some form of chemical or substance in the sea which has enabled a transformation from the goldfish into the lion and the bull, right? So furthermore, like SAD itself is used, it is made out of animal-like juices, let's say, and is used to create a substance which then facilitates in a devil fruit a zone transformation. And a zone transformation is the combination of a person or the user and an animal, most often, right? So what we have here is SAD is a green chemical which, you know, is related to mutations, and its actual effect is to change the form of the user, ultimately anyway, once it's put in a fruit and blah, blah, blah. Shift the physical form of the user. Now, we see this reflected in the fighting fish, their physical form's been shifted. So again, as I said, just to reiterate, we can assume that these two are tied in some way, right? Now, as I say, okay, let me just check my notes before I start tangenting crazy. Right. So, as I say, green bit itself is where the negotiations take place for the SAD between like Caesar, Law, Dofi, blah blah blah. The island itself, as I said, does not look like Dressrosa at all, and the only place that we have seen something similar to this type of forest is in two locations throughout the whole story. Now, both of these are on the Boyne Archipelago. One of them is the Forest of Gluttony, which we saw in Whole Cake Island, and the other is where Usopp was sent by Kuma during the time skip, where he met Heracles. Okay? Now, what's interesting about this is the forest that Usopp was in was called Greenstone Forest. And as I say, it looks very similar to the Forest of Gluttony, and particularly to Greenbit. So, you know, I'm suggesting here that Greenbit was potentially once part of the Boyne Archipelago. Now, Usopp, when he got to the Greenstone Forest, he was trained by a beetle, and in you know, the sort of environment, for example, the pop greens. Now, beetles were heavily featured in Greenbit. Now, also, pop greens, as I say, are from greenstone forest, and they're called pop greens. The interesting thing about pop greens is they take a human form, such as arms, legs, or like Usopp's mandrake, which has a full body. Now, for those who don't know what a mandrake is, right? Like the clues in the name as well, man and drake. So it's a half plant and half man. It's probably most recently popularized by that Harry Potter scene in the second movie. I wish I knew the teacher's name now. That's gonna annoy me. Somebody let me know if you do know. And then, yeah, when Neville or whoever it is grabs the roots and pulls the plant and pulls the plant out of the pot, a little like screaming baby thing is made out of the roots. Now that's a mandrake in sort of common mythical lore. And the reason why I bring it up is because the reason why I bring it up is because Usopp's is not actually called mandrake. It's called human mandrake, and it's a full body. So the reason why this is significant is because, again, we've got, like, if you follow the trail down of green, you get to greenstone forest and you find pop greens, which also take the form of a person. So sad, which is a green chemical, changes your form physically with like from a person usually to an animal. Now this plant stuff like seems to be something a part of Boy Archipelago seems to change the plants from half a person to half a plant. Okay, so we're seeing like another strange mutation here. We also, just before I carry on, I know some people aren't interested in the filler, but as the story goes on, it becomes extremely apparent that the filler is really, really more important. And I can't really speak to this at all because I don't know the anime well at all. Like, I'm a manga reader predominantly. And I've watched maybe 20% of the anime, and most particularly new stuff. So, yeah, I'd have to, like, double check all the sort of filler. Well, not even double check. I need to just watch the anime anyway. But anyway, the point is this: in one of the movies, there's a chemical called sick, which is used as the is a green chemical which is used to hybridize animals together. So again, we have the changing of form and mutation and hybridization through the use of a green substance, and it's called sick, right? So the as I say, it's worth just bringing up briefly, just because it's only filler because it's a movie, right? But it does tie into the fact it looks very similar to Sad, it works very similar to Sad, and it also has this green sort of symbiotic nature as well in terms of its like what it does to people's form, which is what we see on Greenstone with the pop greens. Okie dokie. So the other forest, as I mentioned, was the Forest of Gluttony. Now, what's interesting about the Forest of Gluttony is it is a mixture of plants and trees and consciousnesses, or people, right? Like, consciousness it probably isn't the correct term because, you know, my dog is conscious, but at the same time, she doesn't act on the same agency as I do. She, to be honest, probably acts on a higher agency than I do. But either way, the point is this, like, the trees aren't just conscious and stuff, they're humanized. King Baum, for example, has his head cut off. Like, that's what they say, right? That's how it's, like, characterized. So, and we see the trees have, like, they use their like, sticks, their branches as arms, stuff like this. Hopefully you can hear me right, because my mic was not next to me. I'll just double check the stream real quick. So yeah, as I say, if you follow the trail down, if you start with the mutations and the green chemical sad, and you go down the green tree, let's say, you end up all the way to Greenstone Forest, where you find pop greens, which show a very, very similar nature. Green chem's in my bong right now. Wait, the bullfish is from Dressrosa. Yeah. It's actually, yeah, you got it going on. Sorry, I hadn't checked. Okie dokie. Right, let me just... So, yeah, we got the Forest of Gluttony, as I say. I'll get rid of this. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. Now, let's move on from... So, the reason why I bring up all the green stuff and all the green connections is because Ragnar and I realised that like clearly there's some sort of green substance or green chemical or something like that going on, some greenness, right, which is facilitating mutations and changing of forms. Now, 3 Day Trip has a video coming out at the end of this week, and that'll be on the TLA Theories channel, right? So make sure you're subbed if you're not, because that has way less subs than our live channel. But anyway, point is, 3Day's got a video coming out about the Emerald City, and she discusses like will being often depicted as green. Like the color of will is green. For example, Green Lantern, if you want to get real specific. So she was saying that like, you know, I won't go too, I don't want to leak her theory fully, but there's certain locations that might be more green than others because of the wills that were around that location. But I'll leave that for her to expand on in her video. It's quite a long one. It's like 15 minutes or maybe longer, 18 minutes. Okie dokie dokie. So now the thing is that God Valley's a long time ago, and we saw with the blueprints of life, the lineage factor stuff in the Mads cover story, that like it branched out and it like went around the world, and each sort of scientist did something different with it. For those who don't know, that is what the point of the cover story is that there was X amount of scientists, each of them, like, you know, they discovered lineage factor essentially together, and then they each went their own ways, and they each made a different product out of that. So the thing is, we probably have a similar situation with God Valley. They were probably doing something with lifespan or some sort of science or something like that, experiments that were going on at God Valley, trying to essentially probably create extended life, giants, all the stuff we've seen so far, but before, and probably better. They were probably closer. And it might tie into why Xebec went there in the first place. Like, for example, say Blackbeard is related to him or something, and Xebec found out they were going to be experimenting on his 2-year-old son or adopted son or something. He'd probably go there to try stop that. But they did mention a big heist, so maybe not. Now, the Seraphim are particularly interesting because the Seraphim are, you know, it's a word that comes or derived from the Bible, and it's a type of angel similar to like your depictions of Cupid, stuff like that. Now, we see that depicted in the Lunarian image itself through, like, you know, we know it's not just the Seraphim. We know King looks like that, and he isn't a Seraphim. So he has no like Seraphim connection to the Bible per se, but he physically appears as an angel from the Bible almost, which are what the Seraphim refer to. So we have these Lunarian forms with the wings and all that stuff. The only thing they're really missing is a halo. And what we have here is like the peak of all of this technology coming together. We have the mixture of devil fruits. We have the mixture of like obedience and authority. We have the mixture of strength and attributes. We have a mixture of a solution for the lifespan problem. Now, what hints to us that there is a solution? I think they even mention it might be tied to the green blood explicitly, but the point is that the fact that the Seraphim are stated to be young and grow more powerful with experience, and they grow quite quickly, suggests that they probably are sustained a little bit longer. And the reason why I say that is because that